everyone, did you know that you can make 6 figures in passive income owning a food truck business? Here's how I did it. So 2 years ago, I started a food truck business called Mrs. Cravings, and it was right before the pandemic. And what we did was built this entire food truck out. Back then, it used to cost way less, but today you can still build out a food truck with just $40,000. And here's how to break it all down. So the cost of an average truck today, if you wanted to build something out yourself, is anywhere around 40K, like I had mentioned. Between the equipment, you're looking at about $10,000. With licensing and any type of insurance, you're looking at about $2,000. You also have to consider all the labor that goes into place. That can be anywhere between $10,000 to $20,000. And the actual truck, or if you decide to do a trailer, can be anywhere in between 10 to 20K, depending on the year, size, and where you're looking at. What I did for my food truck was I looked into an auction that sells multiple things. One of them are food trucks and trailers, and I got it for a really good cost at the time, which was around 8 grand, I would say. And what we did was we purchased all the equipment separate, and we outsourced all the labor, like plumbing, gas, electric, because I'm not a plumber, so I don't know how to do any of that. So when we outsourced every single thing, everything came out to, at that point in time, about 18 grand. So when I decked out my food truck, I added in a fryer, and the fryer that I used was mainly for French fries. That cost me about $1,000. With the char broiler, I used that for things like barbecue, smoked salmon, and that cost me about 800 bucks. The hot plate that I put in, sometimes I would boil things or make some type of rice, macaroni and cheese, what have you. It's literally like a stove. So what I used for that was different types of things, and with that, it cost me about 300 bucks. The 2-door sandwich prep table, kind of think about it like Subway, right? If you're making any kinds of tacos or sandwiches, those little compartments that are in the 2-door sandwich prep table is designed for you to put your condiments like tomatoes, onions, pickles, what have you, however you're utilizing it for. And then it also has storage underneath. So if you're making any type of sandwiches, if you have any kinds of tacos, you have your cheese, your condiments, all that jazz. That cost me about 1,900 bucks. The soda cooler and the freezer was about $3,500, and literally what it's used for is for storage purposes. If you want to use it for your sodas, sometimes what I would do is I would cut half of the soda cooler to put all the sodas at the top so that people can see them, and at the bottom I would use it for any extra storage space. And then my favorite equipment is the flat top, because literally I use it for everything aside from all the other equipment, but it was my favorite because it's mainly what I cook out of. I would do literally anything, quesadillas, tacos, anything that is literally being grilled. That's what I use it for, and that cost me about 700 to 800 bucks. So in total, you're probably looking at about $8,500 in all the equipment, plus probably taxes. And if you want a full service kitchen, this is a lot of stuff that you want to consider, and always make sure to check out for the warranties as well for this equipment. So although I'm not an expert when it comes to plumbing, gas, and electric lines, I did build out the entire food truck in regards to the foundation of it, putting on the walls, you know, the simple stuff like if you're building a house. But I had to outsource all the difficult labor. So let's talk a little bit about the plumbing. The plumbing, obviously you have to break it down. With that, there's materials such as your 3-compartment sink, you have your hand sink, water pump, water heater, water tanks, and then all the glue, all the piping that needs to be outsourced. The reason why I outsourced that was because I'm not a plumber and I don't know what I'm doing. So I outsourced that. The other thing that I outsourced was the gas lines. Of course, I'm gonna outsource that, because if I get a gas leak, I'm gonna definitely regret that and probably explode, which we don't want that. So that was outsourced. There is materials that are involved in that. It includes like your gas tanks. You have the LP gas tanks. You also have to have cages so that they're mounted onto your food truck or your trailer. And it also includes all the piping, the lines, and all that work when it comes to that. And then finally, we talk about the electrical. If you don't want to get shocked, you know, you got to make sure that you have an electrician, someone who knows what they're doing. And don't just get any electrician, guys. Like, don't hire your uncle to do this stuff. They will literally botch your work. But you definitely want to get someone who is a professional that knows what they're doing when it comes to the electrical, and you want to make sure you have the right ampage. With electrical, you have things like the electrical panel, you have all the lines that are running with the electric. You got to make sure you include all the outlets. And when you're thinking about the build of your food truck, it's really important to have that floor plan out, because then you can think about where do you want all the electrical outlets at, right? If you're plugging in any type of a microwave, any type of blenders, If you're plugging in anything, you know, your cash register, you have to consider those things. And things that don't run off of gas, which is like your refrigerators, your freezers, you have to have outlets for those. So making sure you have the right electrician that can help you plan everything out for you and make sure that you have all the proper locations in regards to your equipment, that's what you need. Between the labor and the materials that it takes to do the gas, the electrical, and all the plumbing, you're looking anywhere between $15,000 to $20,000. And the reason for that is obviously everything costs a lot of money nowadays, but it's not impossible to get it done. So making sure that you gather everything you need and making sure you can work with each subcontractor when it comes to purchasing the materials and what they need also helps to save you some money, because a lot of the contractors like to upcharge on the materials if they go get it themselves. So make sure you get somebody who is reliable, number one, and two, that can work with you when it comes to the materials. So I got lucky with my truck, but I will say that it's not impossible to find a used food truck or trailer. You can go to places online like Facebook Marketplace, you can go on Craigslist, you can also go to an auction, and that's exactly what I did. So right now, if you're looking at a used food truck or trailer, you're probably looking anywhere between $7,000 to up to like $15,000, depending on the year, depending on the condition and what type of truck or trailer that you're getting, right? Everything depends on size and what it looks like. When you're looking for a trailer, you want to make sure you get the proper trailer. There's a big difference between getting a single axle trailer versus a double tandem axle trailer. And basically the difference is the amount of weight that it carries. So a single axle trailer is basically a trailer with two wheels. If you have a bunch of equipment like what I had broken down, your trailer is gonna cave in. So you wanna make sure you're getting double axles, which has the four wheels, because it's heavy duty. If you're trying to look for a food truck, you definitely wanna make sure everything under the motor is good. Granted, if you're going to an auction, you wanna make sure you look into the history of that truck. Sometimes people will let you turn it on, listen to the engine. So make sure that you have a professional or some type of mechanic that can kind of hear it out so that you can, when you turn it on, you can hear what it sounds like. At the end of the day, doing everything that is either new or used, there's always a risk no matter what, but this is just a way to kind of get started. So ultimately, everything to start a food truck business would be anywhere around 40K. And now that I broke that down, let's talk about how I made this shmoney. One of the ways that you can make money, or this shmoney, is by renting it out for events. So you have different events like weddings, you have events like festivals, you have fairs, you have parties, birthdays, what have you. The point is there are so many different opportunities out there for rentals, which is the main source, and that's a way to make money. Now, how you can do that is the real question. One of the things that worked for me was being able to offer that to people who just don't have the money to start. So there's a lot of chefs out there that don't have that type of capital to outsource to make that money and build out their food truck. So what they'll do is rent a kitchen and they'll deliver their food, what have you. What I do is rent it out for the weekend so that people can have it to make money on their own without having to dish out thousands of dollars starting their food truck business or wait to have that potential clientele for the future. You have different ways, right? You have ways like a flat rate or percentage. The way I did it with a flat rate was charging $3,000 for a whole weekend, but you can make anywhere between $6,000 to $20,000 in a weekend. I have clients making $9,000 in 3 to 4 hours. So it's not impossible. Another way to monetize your food truck is using a percentage-based rental. A percentage-based rental is basically when you are taking your food truck and you're renting it out to someone who doesn't have the funds in order to give it to you up front. So what I mean by that is when it comes to an event that someone wants to utilize your food truck for and they want to rent it out and they don't have that flat rate fee, then you can get a percentage of their sales. So there are some pros and cons when it comes to the percentage-based rental, because sometimes the actual percentage can be less than the flat rate. But at the same time, if someone makes, let's say, anywhere between $10,000 to $20,000 and you have a good percentage, it can definitely exceed the flat rate that you offer depending on what the base is, right? So I would definitely consider those factors when it comes to the percentages, but keep in mind, you do want to have an open idea to that with people who just don't have the money to upfront the cost when it comes to the flat rate. If you're doing a flat rate every weekend for at least $3,000, you're generating about $12,000 in passive income per month. And you multiply that with 12 months in the year, you're generating $144,000 just renting out your truck for any type of event rental. Subtract that from the cost of the start of the food truck, $40,000, you're making still over 6 figures a year doing nothing but letting people borrow your food truck. And in 5 years, you're making $500,000, baby. So with the percentage-based rental, you automatically have an advantage to this, possibly. What I mean by that is, ultimately speaking, you have a flat rate for a weekend, that's just a flat rate, but you have the potential to make it more than that on a percentage basis as a food truck business owner. So what you do is you allow somebody to rent your food truck who can't even afford to give you the flat rate up front, and you pitch a percentage. Typically, you can rent your food truck for up to about 20% or more, but ultimately the goal is for them to make as many sales as possible so that you can benefit from that. So let's talk about numbers here. If someone is generating $20,000 in sales on just one weekend, you're getting at a 20% percentage rate, $4,000 just for 3 days. So if you multiply that by 4, you're getting $16,000 a month. Times that by 12 and you're making $192,000 a year. So do the math. You just invested $40K on a food truck that you don't even work on. Subtract that by $192,000 and you're still making $150 a year. So another type of rental that you can do if you don't feel like doing the event route is doing a lease rental. So basically like a landlord and a tenant, someone who doesn't have a food truck but has the desire to open up their food truck will do something like this. So you just basically rent it out, have a lease agreement, put a base rate on that depending on what the value is of the actual vehicle, and rent it out. When you're renting it out, just think of it as you being the landlord. Literally, this is what you are. You're probably looking at about $500 a month in expenses. So maintenance, any type of storage fees, anything like that, you're gonna look at those costs when it comes to maintaining your food truck or trailer. Because as a landlord, you have to make sure you stay on top of your food truck when it comes to damages. If something were to just break down, those are things you have to replace. Although there are some terms and conditions that you can include when it comes to the lease and any damages that are made upon the actual tenant, these are things you gotta make sure that you do. But it is another way that you can make passive income without having to work on your food truck. So the only downfall that it comes to this is not making as much money with the event rental, but you also have the benefit of someone just consistently staying on the truck, and you can provide these different kinds of terms for them to maintain and sustain the food truck. The advantages of having a yearly lease versus the event rental space is being able to have one person on your food truck maintain, sustain consistently your food truck. So you're not having someone on there all the time, all kinds of different people. You just have one person who has this desire to build out their own foundation and being able to sustain and take care of your food truck as if it were their own. And having a yearly lease with someone generates monthly revenue where you don't have to do anything at all other than maintain the truck for things that landlords would typically do. But you can do all of this stuff on your own terms. One of the major advantages to doing event rentals for your food truck versus having a lease agreement with another tenant is just being able to make more money. Like, you definitely get the upper hand by renting it out, whether it's percentage or flat rate, because it's always gonna be more than renting out the food truck on a lease agreement. To this day, I still have my food truck, but I'm in the lease agreement space because it's easier for me as a mother. I have 3 kids, so you know how that goes. But if you definitely want to start a food truck business, I would highly suggest doing the event rental space because there's so many different opportunities to the point where you can literally grab your money and flip it and open up more food trucks and make thousands of dollars a year, if not more. So if you have any questions, make sure that you check out my website if you want to learn more about the licensing and how to get started at dreamsgonemobile.com.